Hey Trekkies, it's summer, and you know what that means. It's time for Creation Entertainment's Trek to Las Vegas 2025. This year, the convention has been expanded to a 5-day schedule, August 6th through the 10th at the Rio Las Vegas Hotel. Meet all your favorite Star Trek pros in one place, and hey, maybe you swing by Vic's Lounge and you see our panel. It's a great way to meet people in person and have some fun with your fellow Trekkies. If you can't make it to Star Trek Las Vegas, of course, there's also other events around the country this year. Trek to Orlando, August 23rd through 24th. There's the Trek to New Jersey, September 6th and 7th. And finally, the Trek to Chicago, November 22nd and 23rd. We're looking forward to meeting as many of you as we can this year. So make sure that you get ready to trek to Las Vegas.
This is Glen Keenan, and you're listening to Open Pike Night on Reflection, an excellent choice.
Is this thing on? Hello, hello. Welcome to Open Pike Night, the Strange New Worlds podcast where your personal logs are the prime directive. I'm your host, John T. Bolds, here tonight with amazing guests on stage and callers waiting in the wings to talk about Strange New Worlds. Joining me tonight are my co-hosts, the man who can pull focus from even the most dedicated Trek fan, host of Sudden But Inevitable, Jesse.
That's right, Producer John, and although I can pull focus, I prefer to share the spotlight whenever possible.
And the man whose persistence of vision has finally led him to start enjoying more Star Trek, host of Green Shirt, A Newbie's Trek Through the Next Generation, Cameron.
Hey, Persistence of Vision, yours are my first and only college radio show, John.
That's right.
What? And here we are 20 years later, still talking over microphones to each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Our guest tonight is a man who has contributed to the distinct look of modern Star Trek and brought you some of the most beautiful, heartwarming, heart-wrenching, hilarious, dark, and terrifying shots in Strange New Worlds, as well as short treks and Discovery. Please welcome Director of Photography, Glen Keenan.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks for being here today, Glenn.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Very appreciate it.
Yeah, excited to get the cinematographer's perspective on Strange New Worlds.
Yeah, interesting that you guys, I found that being in Star Trek that the props and the wardrobe and the set design usually come first. So to be invited here is quite the honor. Thanks.
Oh, we're glad.
Absolutely.
We'd love to get the whole crew. I mean, it seems like we're giving some folks a little bit of a film school type education on what happens behind the scenes for Star Trek. So, I mean, that kind of leads to the first question for Strange New Worlds. What does a cinematographer do?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's not as easy to answer as one would like. I think the simple version is we, as the director of photography, visualize the script for the producers and the directors. That's sort of the role. The nuts and bolts of it is me and the shooting crew are sort of the last line before it gets recorded. We're the ones who are there with the actors, watching a performance, seeing it all happen in front of us, and then deciding on where the cameras go, what lenses we're going to use, and when we should roll. When the lighting's done, when everybody is ready, we proceed. So it's a crucial role. Without it, there is no show. As they say, you can do a play with the actors, but you can't make a movie without a camera. So you got to have a camera.
I like that.
Is there much of a difference in a cinematographer's job between the world of film and TV? Or the task breakdown fall about the same, or is it different?
It's the same. Execution changes tremendously. Television is it's a sprint. You have 10 to 13 days to shoot an hour, where a movie these days will shoot 2 hours in 65 to 70 days. So we are crushed to try to give you guys content. It is a difficult task. We use a lot of multiple cameras to try to get as many pages done in a day that we can.
Well, let's go back then a bit. So that's what you're up to now. But how did you first get that bug? How did a young Glen Keenan get interested in cinematography?
I guess you'd say I was one of the lucky ones. I knew at 18 I wanted to be a cinematographer. I was in an art college in Western Canada and discovered the word cinematography in a seminar. And it just sort of jumped off the page to me. And I said, well, this might be something. I love science. I love art. Those were always the two things I loved. And this seemed like a good combination of the two. So I ended up going to film school from art school. And by the time, I was 25, I was employable. I had a reel and I was working. I was shooting commercials around the world. It took me a lot longer to get into television because at the time, this was sort of the 90s, where it was the music video generation. If you recall, you could make a career in music videos. You could do commercials. There was just a lot going on visually then, and movies were very difficult to get into. So I was able to just do the commercial music video route until I was about 40. So I did 15 years of commercials. And then at about 40, television took a big turn, and all of a sudden there were these shows coming out where they're just, amazing shows. The Sopranos came out at that time, all these kind of new theories on how to tell a story. And I was able to transfer myself and got a job on Nikita, which was the reboot of that. Right. So that was my first introduction to television. And I realized the thing that I had been missing doing these commercials and music videos was storytelling. You shoot a commercial for 30 seconds and you tell yourself you're doing a little mini movie. But when the reality is, when you have a dynamic cast doing things in front of you and you get to actually photograph them, there was nothing more satisfying. So I was hooked on longer format at that point and haven't looked back since then. So that was, 15 years ago, I guess now.
Was that a revelatory moment on set then? Or, had you been really aiming to do narrative films?
No, I wanted to get into features. That was something, but it was a difficult thing to get into. There wasn't that many big movies being made, back in those days. I did some second units. I worked with some great directors, Ron Howard on Cinderella Man. I did, some of these things, but to get a main unit was difficult. And this sort of just happened. A colleague was shooting Nikita and said, "Hey, I need someone to come over." And I said, "Okay, I've never done it, but I'll give it a try." And I remember driving home in my car from probably the hardest week of shooting I'd ever done, 16-hour days, stunts and action and very complex work. And realized I'd never been more satisfied. Actually, it was enjoyable. And then to see your work in an hourly format, the one thing that was also happening then is people weren't going to movies as much. They were staying home watching them, what have you. And then there was this television. You just knew people were going to watch it. You could make this great movie that nobody ever saw. But when it was on Fox and NBC and all these stations, you had a good chance there was an audience that was going to see your work. And to be able to watch that work, an hour story being told with every shot is yours, was very rewarding.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah, I remember going to film school, and the people who were there freshman year who knew they wanted to be cinematographers, they were in high demand.
Yeah, I worked a lot in film school. I came out of film school with a reel. I didn't mess about. It was like, no, I don't want to be a director. I'm going to be a cinematographer. So who needs me? And I was very busy in college. Yeah.
Served you well, it sounds.
Yeah.
So do you have favorite cinematographers who inspire you, or favorite films that you really point to as a goal that you aim for?
Yeah, absolutely. So this goes back to, again, late 80s, early 90s. So I was a huge Gordon Willis fan. I don't know if that name rings a bell. He did Godfather and he did, Manhattan, a New York cinematographer. And he, so Gordon Willis was huge. Vittorio Storaro was huge. Conrad Hall was huge. Darius Kanji, who did Seven, he was a big influence because that was right around film school time for me. And I saw Images. I thought the same way that he did. I just thought he was spectacular. But Gordon Willis probably had the biggest influence. He was a commercial cinematographer in New York. And the lesson that I took from him was, in commercials, you sort of learn a whole toolbox of skills. Ultimately, give me a box of Cheerios, I can make it look like $1 million. I could light things for no apparent reason and make them look a certain way. And so once you get a or any script in front of you or any character in front of you, now have this toolbox of skills to say, this scene should look like this. I should make this scene feel like that. So I took that to heart. So when I was in commercials, I sort of used that as my toolbox building era. And then when I got into long format, I sort of now have this great toolbox. But Manhattan had a terrific impact on me. Woody Allen's film. That's what I sort of realized, that the cinematographer's storytelling is a big part, can be as much of a part as the director's and the actor's storytelling. There's definitely a role there. It can be upfront, or it could be really subliminal, and you don't even notice it's there. And some audience members react to it. Sometimes I don't even know why they're reacting to certain images. Some will never pay attention to it, and they would just want their stars and their stories, and that's fine. That's what we're there for as well. I would say, Akira Kurosawa was a big influence on me. I thought his films were magical. Again, those were those kind of things that he'd have a 10-minute static shot, and the actor would just pour himself a cup of tea, and I was mesmerized by it. It was really thrilling stuff. And I think recently Denis Villeneuve, I think he's doing tremendous work. And his cinematographers have always been great story collaborators with him. He just has that, real, Roger Deakins and all the group that have been working with him. It's just been tremendous.
For sure. If you could go back and shoot any movie in history or TV show, like, is there one that you would have loved to have done?
A Bridge Too Far. I was such a war. I thought those were the greatest movies ever made, were those 70s war movies. That just being able to be there and see those tanks rolling down a Belgian road would have just been tremendous to have a camera for. So I used to love wanting to do those kind of films, but there weren't many made, to be honest, of those kind of films. So I would love to have done a Bridge Too Far. That would have been a tremendous, fun time, I think.
I mean, if you're going to pick a war movie, pick one of the best ones ever.
It's so good. So good.
Excellent. So you talked about the toolbox you build with commercial production. So with the advent of, in the last 10 years, there has been a boom of inexpensive, high energy, bright lighting and grip options available that pretty much anybody can just go get a lighting kit now for a couple $100. Not totally professional one, but lighting is all of a sudden something you can just have in your pocket or the trunk of your car. Has that changed the way that bigger productions work, or is it still pretty much a higher grade of material when you're shooting on TV?
We have a bunch of crazy little wacky tools that never exist. I mean, I started when it was film and it was all big tungsten and HMI, and there wasn't even really fluorescence. Kinoflows had just started to come out, and which were color balanced fluorescent tubes. So those, it was that was revolutionary. But now, I mean, in Star Trek, we're an LED show. We have millions of LEDs built into our sets. We have 3 dimmer boards that control these, one that we shoot with, 2 to program with. So there's a lot of technology. So the stuff that's trickling down to the consumer is stuff that we've sort of worked with and asked for from builders. So if you just had a light, I say, okay, what color temperature is it? And the color temperature depends on what you can use it for, when you can use it, why would you use it, and do you have any variations in those things? So those are all the things that I get into, because I have a great electrical department. My gaffer, who is sort of the technical genius of all things lighting, he'll say, I have this great little thing, and I say, okay, so what can it do for me? Can I dim it? Can I control it? Can I change colors in it? How big is it? How much does it weigh? How fast can we use it? So there's a lot of things that go into those decisions. But I do agree. I think, things have gotten cheaper, more accessible for everybody. So really, there's no excuse, to have bad lighting, one would say. But if you look around, it's everywhere. I always look back and I think, with all this stuff that's going on with cheaper cameras, and you can shoot a feature on a Sony or FX3, which we've all know that Creator did. You've got all those options to do these, what would say, cheaper versions, but that's always existed. When I started, there was Bolexes and Super 8s. You could make a movie with those, and rarely people did. It's really the tool is always a tool, and how you use it is up to you, and understanding the tool and what its purpose is. Having portable equipment doesn't always make a great shot. You sometimes want to make, okay, if I put them by the window, I don't need any lighting. And will that be a better shot?
Right.
Really what the skill comes into for some of the roles that we do is we're not given the opportunity to put the perfect lighting situation together because we're fighting a lot of different elements. An actor wants to stand in the corner because its character wants to be there. The street light has to flicker on and off. Okay, well, we don't own that street light, so what are we going to do? So you get into these very specific problem solving, and technology comes into that. So I'm glad the technology has gotten much more flexible. The LED revolution has been tremendous for all of us, I think.
Nice.
Including the consumers and web cameras and all that stuff that you guys deal with as well.
Yeah, speaking of the tools in your pocket, I'm curious, on family vacations and such, are you the go-to camera person, or are you like, no, not on my downtime, someone else can take the pictures?
That is exactly right. Yeah, it's always a joke when we're walking around and someone hands me, "Can you take a picture of us?" And they have no idea who's taking their picture. It's like, oh God. I spent my entire day looking at images. I sit. My joke to myself is I sit and I watch the same TV show for 12 hours a day.
Yeah,
it makes no sense. It's completely out of order, and I watch it for 8 months. So I don't like to shoot things. Of friends, family, and stuff like that. However, since the pandemic happened, I sort of got back into it. I bought myself a nice little Leica camera.
Okay.
A little Q3, and if you know, a Q2 actually, and if you know that it's a fixed lens, so you can't change the lens, but it's very much old school. You set your stop, your iris, your focus, and it forces you to say, I have one lens, I have to go make a shot with this lens. I can't change it.
Mm-hmm.
I have to go find. And so it's a nice restriction. It makes you think about the photo as a photo and not just as something that you can delete later. So I've enjoyed that, and it's actually got me inspired again. So I do a lot more stuff with my wife and my kids where I've taken their photos. But up until 2 years ago, I was the last person you wanted to hand the camera to because I would have handed it right back to you.
Well, going back to the more high-end tools, then you, of course, recently have started using the AR wall, and we've got to ask about that, how that experience has been utilizing that for lighting.
Yeah, it's quite the tool. We launched Stranger Worlds with the AR wall. Previously on Disco, we had sort of experimented with projection and LED screens outside of windows, and we got it working pretty well, I would say. Mm-hmm. But we never actually pulled the trigger budgetarily. There was always other things to spend the money on that show. But since the conception of Stranger Worlds, AR wall was in the budget, so we had that. It really was, the Mandalorian land, and it was like, okay, that was not how I'll be honest, I did not see that as the way that tool was going to evolve, and I give them full credit. That was just like, oh my, that's interesting. Virtual sets. It was very interesting to see that. So we had to learn it. We got the right people. We got the same, Pixamondo, who was our VR vendor, our virtual production vendor. And we went and decided, okay, these are what we think these things need to do. When you build them, you're building them 4 months in advance. So you build the virtual part of the set because it's made in a game engine. And the game engine takes a long time to sort of refine. You have to work with, so me and the designer, Jonathan Lee, and the director, and Akiva and Henry will say, okay, well, this is the scene. They want it on, a Vulcan planet. They're going to have dinner in a restaurant, which is from season 1. And we're sort of like, that's all we got. That's all you get right now. This is 4 months out. We don't know what they're going to say. We don't know what, that's the gist. So you build it, and it takes a long time. You go through many iterations, and you're studying it virtually. You're studying it physically, being at the wall, standing there looking at the backgrounds and rough textures. And you're kind of going, this is never going to work. But as it gets closer and closer and closer, they refine it. They get more precise. Textures get beefed up, and things are starting to come together. My approach to the wall, ultimately, you need the best background you can get. You need the most interesting background because it's still what you're going to photograph. And once you get there, that cannot change easily. You're stuck with it. So if you make a bad choice, and it does happen, or a choice you didn't, or you get very brave and say, "Hey, let's do this," and it doesn't quite come together, you're kind of there. But the other part of it that actually really had me excited when I first heard about it was actually lighting with the wall. So I would build lighting instruments into the wall. So think of a big 20 by 20 white card that's on the wall over top of the actual image.
Okay.
And it would be off camera. You wouldn't see it, but that's instead of me bringing in a 20 by 20 big ass, lighting instrument to light the actors. I tried to do it all with the wall. It took a whole season to get it there because they literally had to build Unreal assets to do this, which was fun. I had a great time. I could pan a camera and move a light just outside of frame to go with the camera. I could have multiple designs into the lighting. We could actually take the video feed and make it represented in a lighting card, and you could really play with it. And I barely swung a light in there, other than just to clean up some actors' faces. So I really enjoy that. Other colleagues of mine have brought in lots of film lighting and things like that. I chose to think, we have this tool, why not explore it? And you're not going to explore it if you fall back on your old techniques. At least for me, that was, I would say, oh, it's not looking good. Bring me in all my stuff I know. I was like, don't bring the stuff I know. Let's see what we can play with.
I would say that you guys have absolutely perfected that, because you mentioned The Mandalorian, and I feel like there are a few shots in that first season where you can kind of see that that's not really a set, and they're not like glaring or anything, right? But once you've been told, hey, there's an AR wall here, naturally you just kind of look for it. I know which shots are AR in Strange New Worlds through some of our conversations with other creatives and through some of the behind the scenes stuff, but you never see it. There's never, a part of an episode where you're like, oh, that's the AR wall. You kind of instinctively know, oh, they use it for the warp core, they use it for big outdoor stuff, but there's no seams. Like, you guys have really elevated that.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Glad to hear that, because it's constant pressure to make sure that we don't break the disbelief for the audience. I mean, I sweat by it. It's like, are they going to buy this? Are they going to buy this?
Yeah, like Jesse said, the warp core, it gets me every time. I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, none of that's there. Yeah. That's all on the screen. Oh, man, because the set must be a pain to deal with. Like, nope.
Yeah, when we first were conceiving of Strange New Worlds, the designer had designed this engine room, and we were going to build it. It was going to be maybe the biggest set that we've ever built. It was absolutely, it was going to be millions and millions of dollars. And then we decided, okay, someone decided, well, what if I think it was Akiva said, no, let's build some sets. So we'll have virtual standing sets. Mm-hmm. And so he designed the same engine room, engineering, 10 times bigger, which we could have never built physically. Yeah. It would have been impossible. So that was a good leap. It's like, okay, if we're going to use the tool, let's really sort of make it something you can't legitimately build.
Yeah.
And then I think, again, just to make sure that it doesn't break disbelief or the immersion of the audience was the next step to that.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Well, before we get into more kind of specific Trek talk, looking through your resume, it is pretty full of genre shows. Is that something you kind of seek out, or is that just kind of how the career has gone?
That's just how it's gone. Yeah. I did the Lucifer. It's, if those are in the film business know, you sort of get your job from who you work with. Mm-hmm. And no one really ever gets hired unless someone checks up on them. Say, hey, what's this guy like? I do it with all my crew. What's he like? Because we're in a pressure sort of environment, and you don't really want to get stuck with somebody who's going to cause you trouble in your department or not be easy to work with, such and such. So I ended up I met Alex on Sleepy Hollow, and Sleepy Hollow was a genre show. And we hit it off there, and then I ended up getting a little bit sidetracked and was working with another filmmaker named Len Wiseman, and Len and Alex. They're all from the same camp. Len and Alex are all good friends, and I did Lucifer with them. So I did the pilot for Lucifer, went on to do that, and when that ended, I left after the first year of that show because Star Trek was out there, and they just basically called and said, hey, would you like to come do this? And I was like, yeah, I think I would like to go do that. And I remember talking with my wife, and I said, I might be stuck here for a while. This, it's been 6 years. I knew that if I said yes to it, I would sort of enjoy it, and it would be something that I would probably have enough appetite to do multiple years of. Some shows you don't want to, like Lucifer, I did a year, that was quite enough. Sleepy Hollow, that was enough, But this one, this will be going into I'm doing Section 31, so that's my third
cool.
one, and then we've got another one after that they're all in pre-production for. So I've sort of been in space for a while. How about that? Yeah, but I do enjoy. I mean, I would like to do something a little probably more personal at some point. But for now, this is where we are, and I can't complain at all.
That's excellent. Well, let's roll over into talking more about Star Trek, and we'll have our caller Abby lead the way.
Hey, Open Pike and Glenn. This is Abby Summer from the First Flight podcast. First of all, Glenn, thank you so much for all of the wonderful work that you have done to make Strange New Worlds the gloriousness that it is. I know that creatives behind the scenes don't always get the recognition that some of the other people do, but please know that there are a lot of us out here that appreciate you. So my question is, did you go back and rewatch any Star Trek, or watch for the first time, I suppose, any Star Trek to get yourself ready for season 2 of Strange New Worlds? And speaking of rewatching, what is something that you had a hand in on season 2 that you are really hoping that people notice and rewatch over and over again and get that same amount of joy each time? Hope you and yours are well, and we will talk soon.
You know, as someone in their 50s, I watched, the reruns of Star Trek in the 70s. So I was quite familiar with the genre, with the show. I mean, I was a huge fan. Star Wars, anything to do with space, I was in. I knew what I was getting into. And as I said, when they called me to do it, there was a bit of like, well, what do you make Star Trek look like in 2014? Like, what do we do? What do we do with this? How do we make this into? When did Star Trek even come out? Let me look at that. When was our first? Was it 20? Who knows?
I think the first season of Disco was 2017.
17, I think. Yeah.
Right. So the movies had been out, and sort of like, what do you do? So the movies, which were wildly successful, and I love, we looked at JJ's movie multiple times, obviously. I thought his 2009 Star Trek was brilliant, really, and visually just stunning, all the flares and all that really great stuff. It was really, really a great show. So I looked back at the old shows, and really the word that we kept throwing around, and it was Akiva sort of, and Henry using these words a lot, was nostalgia. We wanted to create a feeling of nostalgia. So, which is a great word. How do you do that in practice? What is that really? I mean, just as someone said, I want it to look really great. Okay, so what does really great look like? So,
which light is the nostalgia light?
Yeah. How do we bring the nostalgia camera with us? How are we going to do this? So really between me and the designer, Jonathan Lee, we had to really sort of find that language. And he was a big part of that. We would look at shows, we look at old episodes, we look at modern retro things that give you that sense of nostalgia, but we're still modern. I mean, it's, I remember I was talking to the crew early on, my operators and stuff. I said, so this is how I'm approaching it. It's basically, we have 21st century technology. We have telescopic cranes, digital cameras. We've got all this stuff, LEDs everywhere. So let's just take those tools and put ourselves in the 60s. Mm-hmm. So what's the language we would use? What's the visual language? So you wouldn't be trying to impress everybody with spinning cameras like we did on Disco. Like that was a different vocabulary. So if you were in the 60s, the audience would want to be able to see certain things. They would want the camera to sort of do certain stuff. So that's kind of the approach. I sort of approached all the problems in that way. Modern 60s technology, for lack of a better word. And that was sort of the approach to get us going. And then the things evolved. The beautiful thing about Strange New Worlds is that every episode was different. So you could break the rule you said you were never going to break. Say, oh, we're never going to do that. Well, we did that. So we sort of had a get out of jail card. And I always thought that, my certain approach to television was you should change things as much as possible so the audience doesn't get bored of being in the same room all the time. If you always went onto the bridge and it always looked the same, or you always went to the captain's quarters and it always looked the same, after 4 years, you might go, okay, show me something new. So we've tried to build these sets with the lighting and the camera work to have multiple different looks, so 6 to 7 looks per set. So you can, and then build from those even more emotional things that you would do. And I will say, I forgot the second part of that question. Is anybody?
Was there a shot or something in season 2 we'll stick with specifically that you really want people to go back to and notice, like your stamp?
My stamp, season 2. Boy, it's been so long. When did we? That was pre-strikes.
Yeah, it's been a minute. Yeah.
I've prepped season 3 of Stranger World and section 31. What was my favorite shot in that season? Interesting question. Probably more, it would have to be a sequence, probably.
Hmm.
I'm a big sucker for the Gorn sequences. I don't know. I loved Aliens, and I love put those two together. They were always. I like the sequence when they discover Scotty.
Yeah.
I really had fun shooting that sequence. It didn't quite land the way I thought because there's, as you see, you look at it, you go, okay, there's 7 characters standing there staring at Scotty. So that's a lot of people's faces to worry about, right? So. But the finding him, I had a lot of fun with that. Any of those gore things were good. I will say one of the prouder ones was my first sequence on the wall, which was Spock and T'Pring having their restaurant. It was the first time we shot that, and I remember lensing up the wide of that, and we had all these really natural reflections on the shiny floor. We pick all these things on purpose: shiny tables, shiny floors.
You guys love reflections, yeah.
Yeah, there's a depth to that I think. We have these discussions again. So nostalgia, grounding the show to the audience, and what does that mean as well? That's something that even though when you were in space, it's very important that they make it feel like it's their home. And you need to get a certain intimacy with the camera with them, or a certain standoffishness with them when they don't want to be bothered. So you've got to play both sides of that, and let the ship be a character. That was always a big thing in the discussions, even on Disco. It's the ship is a character. We have to, when it's in a bad mood, it's going to flash. Lights are going to get angry. It's going to spark, it's going to throw things off, and when it's happy, it looks pleasant, everybody's in a good mood, so you've got to play that into it as well. So I mean, it's hard for me to pick a single shot. I couldn't even break it down if you gave me a week, probably. But those 2 moments stand out. The first wall shot and finding Scotty was a big moment.
Speaking of Spock and T'Pring, when it comes to candles in a scene, is that you? Is that the prop department? Who's responsible for 200 candles in a bedroom?
We're talking about which scene is that? That was
Spock and T'Pring right after the dinner scene in the pilot, right?
When they go to the bedroom.
When they're about to get busy and get interrupted by Pike.
Yeah.
Yes,
candles everywhere.
Spock likes a lot of candles in his bedroom.
Well, you can thank Alex Kurtzman for that one. He likes his candles. He likes to, activity is one of the languages that I think Star Trek inherits, is it wants to have a bit of activity, and lights, candles give activity. I mean, the reason I'm taking a second to answer is I remember on Disco we had candle sequences, and we had a big discussion like, why would they have candles?
Right.
Why wouldn't they be digital? Why wouldn't they just be a digital version of that? I think you get away with it on Vulcan because it's has a little more of that organic vibe to it. All that kind of fire worship and all those things that go on. It's a constant battle between trying to do stuff that is interesting and not too on the nose and still give the audience some variety, I guess, is the best way.
Yeah, no, it looks great, 100%. That's a lot of light a cinematographer has to worry about.
Yes. Yeah, candles are tricky because they go out, and that causes problems.
So transitioning from Discovery to Strange New Worlds, which definitely have 2 very different kind of lighting tones, did you ever find yourself like fighting against your Discovery instincts when you started Strange New Worlds, or were you able to kind of make that transition pretty easily?
Obviously I was concerned about it. I almost was like, you sure you want me to shoot this? Because, I've done that, so how do we make it different? But, we changed cameras, we changed lenses, we changed designers, we changed cast, we changed wardrobes. So there was a lot of new inspirations coming in. It was a super talented group. Bernadette is terrific. Jonathan is terrific. When you approach something, I'll put it this way. Discovery was a blockbuster. That was a blockbuster show. That's how we approached it. It was trying to do blockbuster things. Let's impress. Let's do a lot of great visual things. Let's make a blockbuster movie. And I think, Star Trek, because it's got that nostalgia to it, it became more of a cast exploration. When we did the first episode, Akiva was a director, and we were 2 weeks out from shooting, and we had the bridge was ready, and we had 3 walls of the ready room and half a corridor. That's it. That's all we had, right, to shoot with. So it was we basically shot it over the course of the whole year. We did location work because we couldn't do our location work because of COVID. So we bumped that to the end of the year, which was good because we got better weather, which was great. As scenes came online, we were able to pick up scenes as we went. So we shot that episode over the course of almost 8 months. And and that was the first episode of launching a series. So quite terrified, really. Is this going to, and so trying to figure out the show as to what it should look like was a challenge. And I will admit, until it actually aired, I had no idea what the response would be. We knew that CBS was quite happy, but you don't know until the fans see it if we've done the right thing. And I was hoping that we were onto something, and I think pretty much the majority thought we were onto something, and that felt really, really good. And I think there was enough trepidation from everybody to make sure we didn't make Discovery Part 2, that we made its own thing, that I think everybody's work paid off on that.
100%.
One of our other listeners, Kelly, who's probably suffering the same thing I am right now with her voice, wrote in and asked, are you the one responsible for the very warm lighting on the actors? Because she says the results are wonderful, pleasant, and fantastic. She's a big fan of Ethan Peck's Spock for sure, and just always loves seeing him in a good light.
Who doesn't love Ethan? He's one of the best people. He's a great guy. Yeah, so absolutely. We looked at the color palette of what we did on Disco, and I will say I was part of the decision-making process on Disco, which was a very cool color palette. We had a story that was introspective. It was a world-ending storylines going on. So the bright and cheerful thing wasn't quite where that could sit pleasantly. So the direct reversal to Disco was to go warm. So if you looked at the old bridge sequence from season 2, where we introduced the Enterprise bridge at the very end with Spock and Anson, it was different lighting. It was very cool. We changed the graphics. We went warm, and we knew we were going to go warm. One, because I think it's more nostalgic. I don't think there were many shows in the 60s that would go blue. I don't think that really, there wasn't that much. So this was, again, harkening back to the old warmth, and it, I think it separated the two shows almost immediately. It's subtle. Again, it goes to, sometimes cinematography is subtle and you don't really know why it's different, but that was the reason. That helped to separate the two shows, just a color palette choice.
So like you said, you had a lot of say in designing the overall look of Strange New Worlds. Were there things that you introduced in the pilot that you didn't expect to kind of carry on or grow legs the way they have for the rest of Strange New Worlds so far?
I think from the first shot, it was a risk.
Yeah.
We basically changed the lenses and we changed the camera. And I pitched it to my execs that I wanted to go full frame, which is a bigger sensor. And you put on these full frame lenses. So those in the nerdy camera world will know that a full frame lens has a completely different way of capturing volume of space. Everything gets a little bit more volumetric, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
A sphere. So it's anamorphic. So that's already different. But we did Disco was anamorphic, but these were full frame anamorphics, and the volume gets changed. So when me and the designer were figuring this out, it was like, so if we go with these big lenses, I need big sets so we can make these sets feel big, right?
Yeah.
So let's bring the ceilings down and push the walls out, which was his go-to, and he nailed it. Almost everything frames wonderfully on that set. So, but that was all in conception and theory. We didn't know if it was going to work. It was like, okay, there's no time to test. I mean, you could kind of test, but when you're building a $2 million set, it's built, and now you got to shoot it. So you got to make it work. So I'm happy that worked, and that somehow the magic of it all helped to put it in a nostalgic world. So when you look at it, there's just something about it that doesn't seem modern day, that everybody else was doing, at least. And it sort of has this different, you put Anson in there in his gold, and Spock walks in his blue, and it's like, okay, this is a different world, different universe, and it's got some connection. And I think it does have a bit to do with that lens choice, which was just a gamble, to be honest, and it paid off. So.
Nice.
Strange New Worlds is known for taking big swings in genre and tone from episode to episode, and with that comes the look as well. But yet, it never feels like we're in a different show. It never feels like we're on a different ship, despite those those changes. Is that like a conscious balancing act you have to do when lighting the different episodes, or is that just the magic of television?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, I think you can, if you showed up with a completely different show, it might break the audience a little bit. I think you guys all want a certain Spock and Anson and Rebecca sort of world.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think there's a technical reason why these things occur like that is these shows are uber expensive. And I spent all the money on the camera department already. I have nothing left. The lenses and the cameras are, we have 7 cameras and 40 lenses, and they're all millions of dollars worth of equipment. And when a director comes and says, I want to change everything, I say, well, we don't talk to the producer. Good luck. Maybe we'll do that. So it's basically, again, goes to that approach of, okay, imagine it's the 60s and this is your toys. How would that language work? How would you do a noir version? How would you do an adventure version? How would you do a sub version? What would it be? So I try to give these tools to all of our, I have other DPs. We have, Benji and Ian and Magdalena. And if someone's going to bring in equipment outside of the normal package, there needs to be a discussion that it's a story reason and not for some other reason. And we will, of course, if we can make it happen financially, we'll make it happen. But I think there is a consistency with the tools of shooting that allow the show to stay in the same ilk. But if you use it cleverly, you can take people to a different world. And with the director, with a little bit of tweaking, let's use this part of the set. Let's use this type of lens for this, and shake it up. And then the lighting, as I said, we've built, there's millions of LEDs inside all of these sets, and they're all on a board. And I can call up sections of lights with my gaffer and my dimmer board artists, and we program things all the time and say, well, how do we make this feel like there's a nebula just outside the window and it's going to do this, and the nebula is going to turn off and it's going to be an explosion, and so you build all those things into it. And I think each one of the DPs who works on it brings a little different eye to it. So depending on who's doing what episode, there's been some tremendously great dark episodes. I mean, the musical was, my gosh, it was like a different ship. Right. Mm-hmm. It was fantastic. It was fantastic. So all those different things sort of lean into it. But I don't think you can get away from how terrific the cast is and how embedded they are. Even though you see Anson being this strange guy in season 1, you still know it's Anson, and it just gives you a kick. So I don't think we can go too far.
I like that. So you talked about the light of a nebula shining in. Have you ever consulted, or has Dr. Aaron McDonald or somebody come to you and been like, hey man, that's not what a nebula would look like. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, it's tricky. I have to admit that I'm a science geek. So I love my physics, I love my astronomy. I think it's terrific. And I still think there is a question, how bright are stars when you're in space? Like, because, if you look at, Interstellar, they're quite dim, but you look at Guardians of the Galaxy, it's like a painting out there, right? And if you look at Hubble stuff, it looks like a painting. Like, is that what we would see? So I think when I was working on Disco, I basically would lean into the writer's room and just say, what's outside the windows in space here? And if they didn't really have an idea, I said, well, what about a gold-colored nebula with lightning in it?
Yeah. Can we do that?
Could we do that? Right. Because again, these are things that ground the audience. When you have light coming through windows, it doesn't really matter if it's purple or pink or whatever. It just allows the audience to say, oh, there's something out there. There's something that you can relate to. There's a sun streaming in when you get close to a star. There's nebula activity. I think that it's an important part of the show to keep the variety in each set, is to have space again be a character, and usually there is something already there, and we have to track it. Okay, they're near a binary star, and they're going around, and they go into the shadow of the moon. It's like, oh boy, when do they go to what line are they going into the shadow of the moon? So then we got to cue the lights, and we got to do all these things. So it's important storytelling those moments, and I don't think they're at all accurate. That's completely made up by what's going to look cool. That's a look cool moment. How do we make it look cool? Yeah,
It looks so
There's a
cool.
reason
It
they
does.
have the rule of cool, man.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Speaking of looking cool, Jesse and I have had a bit of a contentious relationship about one of the aspects of the ship as a character, and that would be Captain Pike's fire pit in his.
I was wondering if this was going to come up.
Oh,
How do you run toward? Well, first off, I'm saying open flame on a ship is a terrible idea. Jesse says it's holographic fire, but that notwithstanding, do you relish the scenes where you get to shoot next to natural flame or at least projected natural flame?
you know, you're not wrong. Those exact words were talked. You know, should you have one? Should you not have? Is it real? Is it not real? I'll tell you, it's real because it's bloody hot in that set when we have that thing going. You know, and it doesn't move out of the way. It's a bit of an anchor. We have to sort of shoot around it. So there was scenes that I just loved it. I put it on. I lit the whole room with it. You know, basically, Pike is just sitting, having a scotch, having by the fireplace. You know, and do the whole do that whole look. There's many scenes where that feels like the right thing to do. And I think as a storytelling tool, it's quite cool for Pike to have that. You know, it is again grounding his character. He's got this organic material, call it fire, in his room, and you can play a scene around it that feels very, again, nostalgic, and it lets the audience think this is a conversation they could have around their fireplace. Now, if it was a hologram fire, or if it felt a little more techie, maybe it removes a little bit of the connection. But you know, Jonathan kind of nailed that space. We when it was being designed and he put the fireplace in, I think there was probably 13 different fireplaces.
Oh, wow.
You know, and we moved them around. Should it be here? Should it be there? Everybody knew they wanted a fireplace, though. I don't think anybody wanted it not there. The only people who didn't want it there was special effects, because it was really difficult to plumb the air into it, and, you know, have it escape the set and all those kind of things. But I run between I want it on or I want to ignore it. It all depends on the scene for me.
It definitely adds
Nice.
to that warmth of the Captain Pike character, like you were saying. And he, you know, being introduced to him, and he's in a cabin in the wilderness. Like it's like this nice little connecting thread back to that cabin. So I'm very glad that it's there. And the holographic thing is mostly just to refute John. Like, you're right. It's probably dangerous, and OSHA would be pissed.
Yeah. But it looks so damn cool. So that's going in the cool factor pile, I think. You know, one of my favorite things to have the fire going and have a nice warp effect outside the windows. I mean, those two things together, super urban technology and then a nice organic fire. It's like they're nice two interesting things playing together.
Very cool.
I'm going to sidebar us real quick because we're talking about looking cool. And we asked for Glenn's headshots, and we got 2 headshots. And they were both probably the coolest headshots we've gotten.
Oh, come on.
One of which was you on a motorcycle. So I have to ask if do you race motorcycles? What's the story there?
Well, I've always been a motorcyclist since I was very young. So I did what we call recreational track days. So I would do a track day, right? So it's just a bunch of old farts on bikes. I like Ducatis and Aprilias and expensive bikes, which is good because it keeps the younger crowd out of there. It's old expensive bikes. But I did that for about 10 years, and I've sort of retired from the track. It's very difficult to get track weekends. One being in Canada is difficult because you only have so many months to ride, and then work would always get in the way. But I've had many bikes that I've raced at the track, and now I ride. I'm getting more into adventure riding. It's a little more. If you know what that is, basically ride off in the dirt on a big bike and go for days. Go camping. I'm a big camper, all those kind of things. So, you know, those are my hobbies: video games, motorcycles, and weightlifting is kind of what I do now.
Well-rounded.
Trying to stay in shape as someone who has to be on set as much as I do. So.
Yeah.
Have you pushed for a motorcycle scene in Strange New Worlds yet?
There was talk. Is it this season? I'm not going to say anything more.
That's it. Okay. Well, we'll leave it there.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll be your one-word tease. Talk.
I know on Disco they did a what did they call it? They called it not scooters but skidders or something that they did. So that was an interesting ploy. Oh yeah, I was whenever that comes up, like, well, it could be this, it could be that. I know that again, I can't talk about it, so I'm going to move on.
Okay, all right, that's a good tease.
Yeah.
Great car chase in
All right.
season 2 with Kirk and La'an, though. I will just throw that out there.
You like that one?
Yeah.
That
Okay.
episode, it gave me some pause, right? Because I was like, I don't want them to be now. I want them to be in the future. But
Yeah.
when you accept that, you know, the natural thing is to put Kirk in a car chase. He's an action hero. Like, it just, I was able to accept it eventually. Yes.
Yeah, that was a tough episode. You know, that was middle of COVID. Well, this was the year 2 of COVID,
Mhm.
and that was supposed to be my episode. And 2 days before we went to camera, I got COVID.
Oh,
And I missed 10 days of production. But while I was gone, so I did my 10 days, I couldn't do it. And then the DP who was doing it, Ian, he got it.
Oh.
And so did half the crew.
Oh, wow.
So we had to finish that. So I had moved on to another episode mentally, and I had to go back in there and finish that episode. And half our, extremely talented crew was gone, and we just had people in for the day who had never been on Star Trek before. It was one of the more difficult episodes to get in the can. And I was quite worried that it was going to turn out like a shambles. So I'm glad people liked it in the end.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was a tricky one to do.
Again, the performers.
Yeah.
I mean, you stick a camera on their face, and
Right.
they're gonna knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you'll have an answer for this, but I'm very curious as somebody who's not super familiar with, how shots get set up and things like that. I'm kind of just more the Trekkie fan, like wide-eyed guy on the show. But Quentin Tarantino has his signature trunk shot. Hitchcock has the dolly zoom combination. Would you say that you have a signature shot? And if so, what is it?
Interesting. I would say I don't have a signature shot. I think that when we were doing disco, I got really into trying to get as much into one shot as possible. So I would challenge my uber talented Steadicam operator, Francois, who's my A-camera operator on Strange New Worlds, to follow the dialogue around the bridge.
Yeah.
So we would, just chase people. So that I use some of that on Strange New Worlds. I suppose it wouldn't be a shot; it'd be a sequence where we would shoot our dialogue sequences on the bridge, and then I would say, "Okay, Francois, go." And give me a pass. And he would just go and make up these incredible moments of transitions that would happen. Sometimes we'd use them. Sometimes you could base the entire scene off them, So I think if I had a signature, it would probably be a bold pass. Let's do a bold pass that may or may not work. And if it does work, great. We've got something to elevate the scene. And if it doesn't, we know we've done our work and they can build a scene from it.
Very
that.
fitting.
Yeah.
I think that fits with just the whole look of the
Oh,
show.
good.
Like, it's very bold. It's
Yeah.
more colorful than most shows that you see on TV now. So I think, I think that
God,
works
yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
To boldly go, gentlemen. That is
there you go.
go.
So to boldly go into some more specific episode questions, the Broken Circle contains a lot of shots with reflections and vertical camera inversions. You had mentioned the reflections earlier. Just kind of talk a little bit about the thought process behind those kinds of shots.
Where we had Chapel and Mbanga dropping down with the camera doing the full.
Love that episode. That was with Fisher. Yeah. That was, well, there is a language there with the reflections, and we're always looking for ways to get in and out of scenes and to bridge scenes, and this became a pretty obvious episode to play with those things. It wasn't, comedic. It was action, and there was some darkness to it, and there was an escape ploy to it. So, seeing someone thinking in a reflection, there's something interesting about it. It gives you another viewpoint, another world to take you into your world. And I think, when me and Fisher were putting that one together, there was lots of talk of how do we get between the transitions, not in a show-off way, but how do we get it in a story way, and how do we keep the story moving? And he came up with some great stuff. A lot of that stuff was him. And I will say, I got everybody trained now that my operators will come and say, I got this cool reflection over here. Like, well, obviously we're going to shoot that. Okay, so that's great. So there's a lot of those moments that are found as well. As many as we I will say, as many as we try to script into our shooting schedule, there are a bunch that we just find, but there's no lack of opportunity when you put glass over a piece of black furniture, which is what we do.
Very cool. So Charades, the human Spock episode, is, I mean, one of the funniest episodes of Star Trek ever, in my not always quite so humble opinion. Is there a big difference in shooting for comedy rather than, say, action or suspense? Jordan Canning mentioned there was like a 3-hour tone meeting to lock Charades down as a comedy. I mean, because you've also filmed a lot of the series' biggest combat sequences. So is there a big difference between shooting for comedy and action?
100%. So 5 was not on my was not one that I was going to do. And I made it pretty clear. Don't let me shoot comedy. I've had terrible luck shooting comedy. I've really not, I've done one, I did a comedic movie that was just a visual disaster in my opinion, years and years and years ago. But COVID hit, I had no choice. It had to be mine. So I said to Jordan, Jordan, I'm just going to, whatever you kind of think you want to do, let me know, and I'll follow your lead, and I'll try to do the best I can. But it is a different vocabulary. It is much different. And I give Jordan and my operators credit for that. I interjected. I tried not to get too dramatic with the lighting. I think I might have got too dramatic a little bit later as they were, sitting around at the end, but because I can't help myself. That's why it's difficult. Some people are very good at comedy. It's been hard for me. It's hard for me to do it. So I'm glad that people like that one, because I was worried that I didn't hurt it. That's for sure. And I think Jordan, I think Jordan elevated it. I think she was tremendous. I really enjoyed working with her on that. And again, this is a good example of, put Ethan and Anson in front of the camera and let them do their thing, and don't get in the way.
Yeah.
It was one of those moments. It was a great script, and I'm glad. In the end, I'm so glad I got to do it. And I'm not as frightful of comedy as I was before that.
That's good.
Very cool.
Fantastic.
I mean, one of the best parts of that episode, I think, is the stuff that's happening in the background. So,
yeah.
I mean, did that come from the director saying, like, make sure to get that because I directed that actor to do that? Or were you also kind of like catching those things and framing him up?
Well, I think we all started seeing Anson doing stuff. Like, that was just him, right? Anson is quite hilarious, and his timing is, you wouldn't, it's really quite on the nose. So he knew where to stand. He knows how we shoot, and again, those wide lenses, again, that volume aspect, you can stage a lot in one lens, and once he was cracking everybody in the crew up, it became like, okay, let's make sure that we get more of this, because it was really good. It was, and again, not scripted in such a way, really. It was that performance sort of came from Anson, and it just fit so well that it became. When he walks into the door at the transporter.
I love that shot. I watch that and laugh.
John has brought that
time.
shot up many times on this podcast.
Yeah. Well, obviously that's not scripted. That was just Anson saying, what if I go to the door and this happens?
Oh,
and
wow.
he says, let's try
Doesn't
it.
open.
Yeah. We did multiple takes of it opening, but that was obviously the one that really did work.
Oh man, that's great.
So we had editor Dana Gasparin who edited that episode on. Do you work much with the editor once it gets to that point?
I usually work with the editor when they're tired of editing and they want to be directors. So I've worked with a number of great Star Trek editors who've gone on to do some directing. No, that my role sort of, I have a gap. So I do the production of it. I record the images, and then we hand it off to the editor, and then I get involved again for the final color correction.
Okay.
So we put the final look on it, and that's usually, I will see it before the effects gets put in and the music is done and the audio is done. I'll see a cut to see where things need to land visually. But the editors are the assemblers of it all, and I have no say in that. And sometimes it's like, what about that shot? What about this shot? They just don't make it in, and they say, the DPs would be tremendously bad editors because every shot would be 5 minutes long. So.
But gorgeous.
But gorgeous.
Yeah.
Trust me, it's gorgeous.
Did it ever go the other way, though, where you watched the assembled and were like, oh, wow, they really made something out of that. I didn't think that would work.
Yeah, many times, because we shoot so much footage and there's a time crunch episodic wise. Well, mind you, not so bad with the streaming world, but there still is a time that they're trying to get to. So, when things get eliminated, so sometimes we've shot sequences that just didn't make it into the cut, or parts of a sequence or a character's moment that didn't make it in. And it's usually for the better, and that's editorial, that's Henry, that's Akiva. Mm-hmm. I think precise storytelling is kind of what the show needs to be. It needs to hit its points when it needs to hit its points. And I think that the editors and the showrunners do a great job of that. Because I would do 10-minute epic drone shots if I could.
Yes.
Here for it. Yeah. So Charades also contains a lot of like repeated camera movements. I'm thinking of Spock and Kirk at the briefing table, or the crew in the lounge where the camera's panning around to get all their reactions to jokes. And it really helps play with the expectations for the sake of comedy. Are those movements a decision that you get to make, or is that kind of all in the script?
That's where you feed off the script, yes. One of the key roles, I guess, of a cinematographer, a director of photography, is trying to amplify the scene, trying to amplify the words. You want to be able to put something that helps tell the story, in a visual way. And then in that case, that worked. I mean, we try to do it all the time, but it doesn't always work. There isn't always a direct correspondence to the emotion to a camera. But in that case, I think comedy does have a bit of that, where you can do those sort of those pans at the right time to help land those moments. I think it's very astute that you saw that. That's very nice to hear.
Thank you. Charades is way up on my list of favorite Trek episodes. I mean, I've probably seen that one 8 or 9 times, so very grateful to get to talk to you about that. And specifically your next episode, Under the Cloak of War, I believe I pegged as my favorite episode for the entire season. And that one is both thematically and visually darker than most Strange New Worlds episodes. Did that present any unique challenges while you were filming it?
It was presented as the darkest episode that we were going to do. It was, we sort of knew that. We knew where Mbenga's storyline was going. I love Baz. He is just a tremendous actor. And again, I felt confident that we just had to get him in front of the camera, and he was going to pull something off. And he pulled it off. But visually, it was a bit of a leap for us, and we did a lot on the asset. We relied on the asset probably more than any other episode, and that was stressful to try to make sure that we got enough variety out of that, that the audience wouldn't say, well, why is it so dark all the time? Why is this? Why is that? And try to tell a war story without actually ever seeing the war, which was, again, a challenge. I would have loved to have a row of tanks and we could have gone out there and done that part, but we didn't get to do that part. It was a challenge. That was a very challenging, emotional, story for the actors. It was PTSD, dealing with those issues, which a lot of people can relate to. So there was a lot of care in that one, and a very ambitious script. It had to tell a lot of story, and get a lot of things out of it. And I think it was pretty successful. I'd like another crack at it, to be honest. I think I could give you a better version again, but that's what we got this time. That's what the schedule gave us.
Do you have a specific example of that?
I just think that visually, we probably could have helped land that war trauma a little more. I think there was probably another place we could have gone. But I also remember that we did shoot a lot of stuff. And again, I think some of it may have been too much, that we had to put it on the cutting room floor, perhaps. My memory's not so great on that one, to be honest.
It does contain a healthy dose of what appear to be handheld shots. Is that like a decision? Do you remember the thought process leading up to those kinds of decisions?
Yes, there was handheld. That's one of those things that kind of becomes a natural way to tell a war story since Saving Private Ryan. It sort of takes you to that language. I changed lenses on that episode, so we'd had different lenses for the flashbacks when they were on on the planet in the midst of the Vulcan War, to try to give it a different time frame, change the colors. We did a lot of things to help sort of differentiate those periods. And I mean, to me, when I go back to that thing about maybe could have done a bit more to get the war story, I think the most successful parts was Baz when he was having his PTS breakdowns, when the camera was right in his eyeballs and shaking, and focus was weird and the lights were doing weird things. I mean, I think those were very successful. Really enjoyed that part of the episode. I think some of the stuff on the planet was difficult to keep that intensity up on a wall.
Right. On the wall.
Yeah,
I think the sound department came and did a lot of work on that. That whole incoming transport just repeated.
Yes.
That really brings you into that scene.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a tough episode. Emotionally. I mean, Baz did a heck of a job, but he had to go through he had to take himself to places, as they say.
So I've noticed a fair amount of shifting focus within the same shot in your episodes, sometimes between characters and dialogue, things like that. Would you say that your time working as a focus puller helped you develop the instincts for that?
Yes and no. I was not I only focus pulled for maybe 2 or 3 years. I was shooting by the time I was 25. I was like, okay, I'm a DP. I'm not much of a crew guy. I'm not much of a focus puller. Although it was a great job, and then I was going, hey, I could do this. This is pretty fun. All right, this is not
Turn
bad.
this dial that way. Turn this dial that way. No.
Yeah, play with cameras all day. It's a pretty good gig, I tell you, man. And those who do it, really enjoy it. But I will say that for me came from trying to survive in sort of a lower budget world of storytelling early in my career, where you only had a few things that were free to tell your story. You could compose for free, right? What you decided to put out as your composition, that was a free choice. And another free choice is how you use the focus. So you could tell the story with the focus, and that didn't cost you anything. So I did a lot of that, where you would focus and move cameras and try to tell the audience the story by where the focal plane was. And I've never forgotten how that could communicate quite clearly what you're doing, and can give the shot a little extra juice, or the editor doesn't have to cut as much. And I think that's something I've enjoyed on Strange and Discovery and Strange New Worlds is trying to tell more story in a shot than traditionally you do in television, where you just cut. And part of that is being able to actually tell the story in the shot, not just shoot a shot. And I think that needs to be clarified, that, there's a million shots in an episode, but how many are telling the story? And the more that tell the story or help tell the story will make the episode better.
Very cool.
I like that. So
Hegemony, the sudden longest cliffhanger in Star Trek history. It starts with this really idyllic look at this colony on Shangdai before it shifts into more an intense look after the arrival of the Gorn. Is it difficult to marry those two visual styles?
I wouldn't say difficult. It had to be that way. I think we had to misdirect the audience for it to allow the darkness of the Gorn to have its space in the story. I'm big on that kind of language, where you need to juxtapose different visual tones, whether it's color or lighting or brightness, darkness, camera movements, no movements. I think those are all languages that need to be explored. So the opening, man, you just put a guitar on that, right? And you could be on any country show that's out there. But I think you probably, as the audience, knew something. It's never that good in Star Trek. Something's gonna happen. So then when it does happen, you have to deliver that. So if it was an intense opening, then when the Gorn arrived, we're not so intense. So you needed something to go against that intensity that I knew was coming, and it came pretty quick. I think visually it was like, okay, slam, now you're into it, and now we've got ourselves a little action horror movie to play with.
Yeah, absolutely. Having the Gorn show up in a literal storm cloud, I think, brilliant choice. And you're right; it immediately puts you in the headspace that you need to be in. Speaking of the Gorn, a lot of fans have noticed the similarity between the Gorn and the Xenomorphs from the Alien series of movies. Were you able to draw some inspiration from that for your camera work in Hegemony?
I mean, I think there's original Ridley Scott Aliens still stands up as one of the greatest sci-fi horrors of all time. It really is that good. I was definitely trying to do the Star Trek version of that. Again, what you have to be, you don't want to copy, you really even want to imitate, but you want to be inspired by those works, and it needs to be your own. So, we always talked about, again, what does Strange New World want to look like? Well, it could be this, or this, but really it's a whole bunch of different movies that we all love, me, Fish, Akiva, Henry, Alex, and then it just spits out what our version of that is, and I think you have to allow that. And no one ever said to me, make it look like an Alien episode, do that. But I knew that there was, a language there that that Ridley Scott had just mastered, that we could lean into and help the audience get to that point. Now, I don't think that episode looks a lot like Alien at all. No. I don't think it does, and I don't think our aliens particularly look like the aliens from that era. I think it's funny. I've sat in my share of monster meetings, and it's a harder thing than the audience gives them credit for. They are constantly throwing out designs. No, that looks too much like that. No, that so. There's really not a lot left when they get down to it, because filmmakers have done a lot. There's been a lot of stuff, and you have to be, again, able to afford it budgetarily. You have to be able to make it a character that you want to see over and over again, and budgetarily can do that. So it's an interesting play between what they would really like it to be and what we can actually achieve technically and budgetarily. So I think really the part that I liked the most was probably on the ship and the zero-G battle. I think that was very interesting. That was a very difficult challenge. You want to do what? You want to do zero-G with a gourd? Okay,
and an actor.
Yeah, and an actor in a suit. Yeah. Again, I do, as a fanboy of Trek myself, I do hear the, I wish they could have done this as a story, and why don't they do this story? And again, we have 13 days to shoot these things, and we have a limited budget. We can only do so much, and some of the stuff I would love to do, we can't do. There's moments in scripts that were just so good that ended up not being able to do for a variety of budgetary reasons. So, take it easy on our writers, take it easy on our showrunners. Some of these decisions are out of their control. It's not an easy genre. Science fiction is the most expensive thing to, that and fantasy, those two genres are incredibly expensive to do. And to do them well is even more expensive. So we're kind of in that midpoint of trying to make the stories fit our budget so we can execute them at a level that the audience can enjoy.
Absolutely achieved. Again, our show is not really known for being like the hard-hitting critical analysis. We're like we're here to celebrate this show and the people that make it, because it really does feel like a gift every week when we fire up Strange New Worlds. Now, you had mentioned the difficulty and some of the difficulties that can arise when making a show like this. So, if you had to look back, is there one shot or sequence that really sticks out to you as like, okay, wow, that took forever to get it right?
Interesting. I think that zero-G fight was one of those moments. That was a tricky. We had a second unit shoot for days, and then we went and shot for days, and it was a challenge. And we had a guy in a suit, right? Yeah. Like we had a guy in a suit, right? So we had real prosthetics, beautifully made. We had a guy hanging upside down in the corridor for, as long as he could hang there. I felt for him, but we had to get those shots, and it takes a lot longer than you really want them to take, and that's another burden of filmmaking. Is it's not a quick process, to get the shots good. You could just shoot stuff and put it together, and say, okay, here you go. But would the audience accept that? I'm of this side that no, they wouldn't. So let's make it good. If we're going to do a sequence, let's make it the best that we can. So those were challenging moments. The whole sequence from the moment Spock goes to space is. And Jesse's on the ship. That whole, I think we probably shot that over a week. that was some of the trickier stuff to sort of really make sure we did it right. Because it could have. I mean, those were my alien inspiration moments. That corridor on fire. We discover her. Oh, she's alive. And yes, there's like, why is she alive? We know, but she's in an air pocket.
Yeah.
That's how we're dealing with it. And she's got gravity because that's how this part of the ship survived, So, but playing those up and trying to get to those emotional moments that the camera can help tell that story. That was really, I thought, successful, but it took a long time. And thankfully we gave ourselves the time on that. Maya was the director who I've worked with a number of times on Treks. And she's an ex-editor. And is wonderful at knowing what she needs to tell the story. So that allows me to really put all my energy into telling the story and not just covering a scene and giving him options. Like, she knows the route, and that helps to tell stories when the director knows the route to the story. It's vital, really. And that was a sequence that could have been not as impactful, I think, had we not done it the way that we did it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Could have felt like a guy in a rubber suit. Like it did in the 60s.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Glen Keenan, Open Pike Night is an Open Mic Night themed podcast. Do you have a joke for us today?
I do have a joke, and it's an awfully film-centric joke.
Yes. Excellent.
Okay, here we go. Why don't DPs smoke?
Ooh.
Why?
Because it takes them 6 hours to light it.
Oh, I love that.
It's funny because it's true.
It's funny because it's true. And listen, we do use atmosphere on Trek. We do use it. It's out there.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if people notice it, but it just takes that curse off the fact that we live in space for the whole show.
I really like that. That's really good. Thank you so much, Glenn, for spending some time with us today. This has been very, dare I say, illuminating.
Aha! Well, thanks for having me. Hopefully, it made sense.
It has been a fantastic discussion.
You're very good at taking what could be a very technical, in the weeds topic and making it accessible.
That's good, because I've been in the weeds for 40 years now. So.
Man, that was a fantastic conversation with Glenn, guys.
Oh yeah.
I'll be honest, going in, I was like, I think this is what a cinematographer does, so I'm going to ask these kinds of questions, but I really wasn't sure. So I was glad to actually learn some new information, because, we've talked to everybody from this show, but it was like, there's stuff in here I had no idea about, and I'm really, really grateful to Glenn for stopping by to talk with us.
Yeah, we just are on a roll with these interviews, guys, and we are trying to get more. It's been a holiday season, so communications have been a little quiet with people, but don't worry. Open Pike Night is firing out emails at a warp speed to make sure we keep bringing you guys the good content as production ramps up for season 3.
With all these emails going out, we're hoping to stack up like 4 or 5. And that way, It gives you guys plenty of time to get through each episode. By the way, go back and check out the holiday special. It's really very good. And I'm not only saying that because I was a part of it. Like, it is really very good. We've had some great feedback on that episode. I know you've got the holiday hangover right now, but go check it out because it's definitely worth your time.
Sign up for a newsletter if you're not signed up. Jesse, where can folks do that?
The place you can go to sign up for our free newsletter that comes directly to your inbox is openpike.substack.com. And yes, it is hosted at Substack, but it is free. We will never charge you for that. So go get signed up.
And be sure to go to openpike.com, where you can submit calls. You can find information about old episodes. You can get merch, for any of those last minute New Year's presents, I guess, right? Or first minute New Year's presents. Happy New Year, everybody, by the way. But yeah, openpike.com is the best place to go to find everything about Open Pike Night.
There's links there to our merch, to our Patreon, to everything you could possibly need in one place for Open Pike Night.
Cameron.
Yep.
When you're not on the Open Pike Night stage, where can folks find you?
I'm training my lens on The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine over on Green Shirt, a newbie's trek through TNG. We're just about to finish up with season 6 of TNG and season 2 and season 1 of Deep Space Nine. So tune into that, and we're getting close to the end.
Oh man,
yeah.
I'm gonna have to look through season 7 and plant a flag on an episode. I didn't realize it was
better
coming
hurry.
up.
It's coming up.
But I just listened to your episode with the Duras sisters, absolute blast. I think Bobby may have been having the most fun I've ever heard her have. Like, I remain a staunch green shirt supporter.
Appreciate it.
Jesse, when you're not staunchly supporting Green Shirt, where can folks find you?
You can find me surfing the dangerous waves of the social media sphere at Twitter, or sometimes Blue Sky, sometimes Threads. All of the handles are at Open Pike. We don't maintain all of the social medias equally, but if you DM us there or tag us there, wherever you are, I will come and find you, and we can talk about Strange New Worlds.
Happy New Year again to everybody. It's been a long year. The Open Pike Night crew has to go pull down all this gaffer's tape, and we have to let all these bulbs cool down before we can pack up and get out of here. Be sure to clean up after yourselves. Be sure to tip your servers. You can go anywhere you want, but you can't stay here.